I want to start by saying something clearly, because the title of this is provocative, and I don't want it misunderstood. When I say no human has ever truly sinned, I am not saying that harm doesn't exist. I am not saying that people haven't hurt each other. I am not saying that murder and rape and cruelty are acceptable. I am not saying we shouldn't have laws or punish harmful behavior or protect people from those who would hurt them. What I am saying is more specific and more disturbing. I'm saying that the theological concept of sin, the concept that when you do something wrong, you could have chosen otherwise, you are the true author of that choice, and you deserve punishment for having made it. That specific concept requires a kind of freedom that the physics does not permit. Let me be very precise about what sin requires. Theologically, sin is not just doing harm. Harm can happen accidentally. A child can knock over a vase and break it. That's harm, but it's not sin. Sin is choosing to do wrong when you could have chosen to do right. It requires agency. It requires agency. It requires that the choice originated with you, not just from your brain, but from you as a free agent capable of choosing between alternatives. It requires that in that exact moment, with that exact history and that exact configuration of neurons, in that exact set of prior causes, you could have chosen differently. And crucially, sin requires that this capacity to choose otherwise is not just randomness. A random choice generator is not a moral agent. A coin flip that happens to produce a harmful outcome is not a sin. Sin requires libertarian free will, the kind of freedom where you are the ultimate source of your choices, where your choices are not determined by prior causes, but are also not random. Where you could have done otherwise means something real and physical. That is what sin requires, and the physics says it is impossible, not unlikely, not difficult to demonstrate. Impossible in the same sense that a perpetual motion machine is impossible. The requirements are mutually contradictory. 4 arguments, each one closing a different escape route. Let me show you. The question of I intend is to cure far from Bell's theorem, a mathematical proof from 1964 that closed a gap that philosophers had hoped might accommodate free will. Second argument comes from the Schrödinger equation, the fundamental equation of quantum mechanics, which is deterministic in a way most people don't realize. The third argument concerns the authorship of your intentions, where your desires come from, whether you choose what you want to want. This is the most philosophical argument, and the one I find most personally unsettling. Fourth argument examines what it means physically to say you could have done otherwise, and shows that the phrase has no coherent physical referent. 4 arguments, all arriving at the same place. The theological concept of sin requires something the universe does not provide. Let's begin. Argument only Bell's theorem and the fair physicist named John Bell published a theorem that changed how we unfettered at the concepts. Theorem is usually discussed in the context of quantum mechanics and hidden variables, whether the randomness of quantum mechanics is fundamental or whether it reflects our ignorance of deeper underlying variables. But Bell's theorem has implications that go far beyond quantum mechanics. It has implications for the question of free will. Let me explain what Bell proved. Bell showed that if you want to maintain local realism, the idea that objects have definite properties independent of measurement, and that influences cannot travel faster than light, then you must accept that quantum measurements have genuinely random outcomes. Not random because we don't know the underlying causes, random at a fundamental level, random in a way that no underlying theory can explain away. The alternative, if you reject the randomness, is to accept non-local influences, instantaneous connections between distant events, action at a distance that violates everything we thought we knew about causation and locality. Experiments have confirmed that Bell's inequality is violated. The universe is either fundamentally random in its quantum outcomes, or it is non-local in ways that make determinism even more problematic for free will than it already was. Now, here is what this means for sin. The theological concept of free will requires that your choices are neither determined by prior causes nor random. This is called libertarian free will. It requires a third option, a kind of choice that is free, but not random, originating with you, but not determined by anything prior to you. Bell's theorem proves there is no third option. Either the outcome of a physical process is determined by prior states, in which case it follows necessarily from those states, or the outcome is random, in which case it doesn't follow from anything, including your will. There is no middle ground where the outcome is free, but not random. Philosophers who advocate for libertarian free will typically invoke something like agent causation, the idea that you as an agent can be a cause that is neither determined nor random, that you initiate causal chains without yourself being determined. But Bell's theorem shows this is physically incoherent. A causal chain either has prior causes, in which case it's determined, or it doesn't, in which case it's random. There is no category of causation that is neither. If you say I am the cause, and I am neither determined nor random, you're saying you are a category of thing that violates Bell's theorem. You are claiming to be a kind of entity that the universe does not permit. Now, I want to be very careful here, because this is where people often misunderstand. The fact that your choices are either determined or random does not mean your choices don't matter. It does not mean you are a robot with no agency. It means your agency is not the kind of agency the theological concept of sin requires. Your choices are real. They are yours in the sense that they come from your brain, from your history, from your values and beliefs and experiences. They matter enormously. They shape the world. They affect others. They have consequences. But they are not free in the libertarian sense. They could not have been otherwise given the exact configuration of your brain and the exact prior causes, unless randomness intervened. And if randomness intervenes, the choice is not yours in any meaningful sense. Bell closed the gap. There is no third option. Your choices are either the inevitable result of prior causes, or they have a random component. Sin requires a third option. Bell proved the third option does not exist. Argument 2, 0. The S equation is deterministic. Now, I want to take you into quantum mechanics more carefully, because there is a common misconception that quantum mechanics provides room for free will because quantum mechanics is random. Quantum mechanics is random at measurement and between measurements. Quantum mechanics is perfectly deterministic. The Schrödinger equation, the fundamental equation governing how quantum systems evolve, is deterministic. Given the wave function at one time, the Schrödinger equation tells you exactly what the wave function will be at any future time. No randomness, no freedom. The evolution is completely determined by the initial state. Randomness only enters when you make a measurement, when the wave function collapses. Specific outcome you get is random. You cannot predict whether you will measure spin up or spin down. But the probabilities of those outcomes are determined by the wave function, which evolved deterministically. So, even in quantum mechanics, the physical theory that is often invoked as the place where free will might hide, the determinism is almost total. The only randomness is in measurement outcomes, and randomness is not freedom. Now, could your brain be making use of quantum randomness to make choices? This is a hypothesis that some people advocate. The idea is that quantum events in neurons, perhaps quantum tunneling in synapses, perhaps quantum superposition in microtubules, introduce genuine randomness into brain activity, and this randomness is somehow the source of free will. But this hypothesis has a fatal flaw. Randomness is not agency. A random number generator does not have free will. If your choices are determined by quantum coin flips happening in your neurons, you are not free. You are at the mercy of quantum randomness. Free will requires that your choices are yours, that they reflect your values, your reasoning, your deliberation. A choice determined by a quantum coin flip in a microtubule does not reflect any of those things. It is just random. And here is the deeper problem. If quantum randomness is influencing your decision making, it is doing so by introducing noise into a process that would otherwise be deterministic. The more randomness, the less your choice reflects your values and deliberation. The more randomness, the less the choice is yours. You cannot get libertarian free will from quantum mechanics. You can get determinism with occasional random fluctuations, but random fluctuations are not moral agency. The Schrödinger equation evolves deterministically. Measurement introduces randomness. Neither of these provides the kind of freedom sin requires. Snort's sin requires that you, as an agent, could have chosen otherwise, not that a quantum coin flip could have landed differently. Sin requires that your choice originated with you, not with a deterministic evolution of the wave function, and not with random measurement outcomes. Quantum mechanics does not save free will. It makes the problem worse. Now, instead of just determinism, you have determinism plus randomness. And adding randomness to determinism does not give you freedom. Argument 3. The authorship problem. This is the argument that I find most personally unsettling, not because it's the most rigorous. Bell's theorem is more rigorous, but because it goes to something that feels very intimate, the question of where your desires come from. Let me ask you something. Think of a decision you made recently, anything. Maybe you chose what to eat for breakfast. Maybe you chose to read this instead of doing something else. Whatever it is, you chose it. Now, ask yourself, why did you want that? You wanted breakfast because you were hungry. You wanted to read this because you were curious. Whatever the choice was, you had a reason. You had a desire. The desire motivated the choice. Now ask, did you choose to have that desire? Did you choose to be hungry? Did you choose to be curious about this topic rather than indifferent to it? Go deeper. Maybe you didn't choose to be hungry. Hunger is biological. If you chose to eat eggs rather than cereal, why? Because you like eggs more. Did you choose to like eggs more than cereal? Or is that preference something you discovered about yourself? I think if you introspect carefully, you will find that your preferences, your desires, your values, the things you care about, are things you discover, not things you choose. You don't choose what you want to want. You experience desires, they arise in you. Some of them you endorse. Some of them you resist. But the arising of the desire is not itself chosen. And if you didn't choose your desires, then the choices that follow from those desires are not ultimately yours in the sense required for sin. Let me make this more precise. Every choice is motivated by prior mental states, beliefs, desires, values. You choose A over B because you want A more than B, or because you believe A is better than B, or because it aligns with your values more than B does. But those beliefs, desires, and values, where did they come from? From your genes, from your upbringing, from your experiences, from the culture you were raised in, from the specific sequence of events that shaped your nervous system into its current configuration. None of that is ultimately your choice. You didn't choose your genes. You didn't choose your genes. You didn't choose the society you were born into. You didn't choose the specific experiences that shaped your values. And here is the regress problem. If you say, "But I can reflect on my desires and choose to act on some and not others," I ask, where does the desire to reflect come from? Where does the standard by which you evaluate desires come from? That standard is itself a desire to be a certain kind of person, to act according to certain principles. And that method, desire, also has causes. It also comes from somewhere. At some point, you reach desires and values that you did not choose, that you simply have. And those unchosen desires and values are the foundation of all your subsequent choices. You are not the ultimate author of your choices because you are not the ultimate author of the desires and values that motivate those choices. This is the authorship problem, and it applies regardless of whether your brain is deterministic or has quantum randomness in it. Either way, the desires that drive your choices have causes prior to you. And if the ultimate sources of your choices are prior causes, then you are not the ultimate source. Sin requires that you be the ultimate source, that your choices originate with you in a way that makes you morally responsible for them. But the ultimate sources of your choices are your genes, your environment, your history. You inherit the machinery that produces your choices. You do not create it. And if you do not create the machinery that produces your choices, you are not the author of those choices in the sense required for sin. Midroll CTA. Bell's theorem proves there is no third option between determined and random. The Schrödinger equation is deterministic. Adding quantum randomness doesn't help, and you don't choose what you want to want. The authorship problem is unsolvable. The fourth argument is the one that makes this completely concrete. It asks, what does it mean physically to say you could have done otherwise? And it shows there is no physical meaning. Subscribe, back in 30 seconds. Argument 4, the first there. The physics of could have done otherwise. Let me make this as concrete as possible, 'cause I think the abstraction sometimes makes it feel less real. So, let's use a specific example. You are standing in front of two doors, door A and door B. You choose door A, you walk through it. The theological claim about sin is that you could have chosen door B. That is what makes the choice morally significant. You could have done otherwise. Now, I want to ask, what does could have done otherwise mean physically? Here is one interpretation. It means that if we rewound time to the exact moment before you chose, with the exact same configuration of atoms in your brain, the exact same neuronal firing patterns, the exact same prior causes, you might choose door B instead. Is that physically possible? In a deterministic universe, no. The exact same initial conditions produce the exact same outcome. If we rewind to the exact same state and let it evolve forward, you choose door A again, identically, every time. In a universe with quantum randomness, maybe, some quantum event might go differently. A neuron might fire or not fire based on a quantum fluctuation. And this might lead to a different macroscopic outcome. You choose door B, but notice what has happened here. The difference is a quantum coin flip, not a different deliberation, not a different evaluation of reasons. A random fluctuation in a microscopic process. Is that what we mean by, I could have chosen otherwise? That a quantum coin flip could have landed differently, that is not moral agency. It is randomness. Now, here is a different interpretation of could have done otherwise. Maybe it means if the circumstances had been different, you would have chosen differently. If you had been in a different mood, if someone had given you different information, if your upbringing had been different. In those cases, you might choose door B. But this interpretation does not help because in this interpretation, the choice is still determined by the circumstances. Different circumstances, different choice. The choice is still the output of a deterministic or random, influenced process. You still could not have chosen differently given the exact circumstances you were in. And the exact circumstances you were in, and the exact circumstances you were in, are the only circumstances that actually existed. The could have, in this interpretation, is a counterfactual about different circumstances, not a claim about freedom within the actual circumstances. So, what does could have done otherwise mean? It means one of three things. Option 1, a random process could have produced a different outcome. But randomness is not freedom. Choice determined by randomness is not your choice in the sense required for moral responsibility. Option 2, different circumstances would have produced a different outcome. But this is just determinism. The choice is determined by circumstances. You could not have chosen differently in the actual circumstances. Option 3, there is some kind of agent causation. You as an agent cause the choice in a way that is neither determined nor random. But Bell's theorem shows this is physically incoherent. There is no third category. Could have done otherwise has no coherent physical meaning that preserves the kind of freedom sin requires. The choice was inevitable given the prior state. If quantum randomness intervenes, you might have done otherwise, but the otherwise would be random, not free. There is no third option where you genuinely could have done otherwise in a way that reflects your agency rather than randomness. And without the ability to have done otherwise in that sense, there is no sin. There is consequence, but there is no moral culpability of the kind theology requires. The disturbing you like this means, and what I to say something I want to be very careful now, because this is where the argument can be badly misunderstood. And I want to address the misunderstanding directly. If no one can truly sin, if no one has libertarian free will look as sad mean, no one is responsible for their actions. No, means responsibility is not what theology says it is. Let me distinguish two concepts. Theological responsibility requires that you could have done otherwise, that you are the ultimate author of your choices, that you deserve punishment for bad choices and reward for good ones. Social responsibility is different. Social responsibility says you are a member of a community. Your actions affect others. We hold you responsible not because you have libertarian free will, but because holding you responsible changes your future behavior and the behavior of others. We punish harmful behavior not because the person who did it deserves punishment in some cosmic sense, but because punishment deters future harm. We reward beneficial behavior not because people deserve reward, but because reward encourages more beneficial behavior. This is responsibility as a social tool, not responsibility as cosmic desert. And this kind of responsibility survives even if libertarian free will does not. We still need to protect people from those who would harm them. We still need to incentivize cooperation and punish defection. We still need to treat people as agents whose behavior can be influenced by consequences. None of that requires libertarian free will. It requires that people are responsive to incentives, that punishment changes behavior, that people can learn and adapt. And people can do all of those things without having libertarian free will. Now, Does this mean we should treat harmful people with compassion rather than condemnation? This is a harder question, and I want to answer it honestly. If someone harms another person, and we understand that the person who caused harm could not have done otherwise given their exact history and brain state, should we still condemn them? I think the answer depends on what condemning them accomplishes. If condemnation deters future harm either by changing that person's behavior or by deterring others, then condemnation is justified as a tool, not as cosmic justice, but as harm reduction. If condemnation does not reduce harm, if it only satisfies our desire for retribution, then that justification is weaker. What I am saying is the absence of libertarian free will should change how we think about punishment. It should make us focus on consequences rather than desert, on preventing future harm rather than punishing past sin. And it should, I think this is important, it should make us more compassionate toward those who cause harm, not because harm doesn't matter, but because we understand that the person who caused harm is in a deep sense as much a victim of prior causes as the person they harmed. That doesn't mean we don't stop them. It doesn't mean we don't protect the potential victims. It means we stop them without hating them. We prevent harm without believing the harmful person deserves to suffer. This is hard. I find it hard. When I think about the worst things people have done to each other, the cruelty, the violence, the indifference to suffering, my immediate emotional response is that those people deserve punishment, deserve suffering. But when I follow the logic carefully, when I trace back the causes of their actions to their genes, their upbringing, their experiences, the specific configuration of their nervous systems, I cannot find the place where libertarian free will enters. I cannot find the point where they became the ultimate authors of their choices. And if they are not the ultimate authors, they do not deserve punishment in the theological sense. They should be stopped. Their victims should be protected. Future harm should be prevented. But cosmic desert, the idea that suffering is an appropriate response to sin, that idea loses its foundation. That is disturbing. I know it is disturbing. It disturbs me. But disturbing truths are still truths. The turn red's way out. A prince restore truth. No human has ever truly sinned in the theological sense. The physics does not permit the kind of freedom that sin requires. What does that leave us with? Harm still exists. Suffering still exists. Cruelty, violence, indifference, all of these still happen. All of them still matter. What changes is how we understand responsibility. We move from responsibility as cosmic desert to responsibility as social function. We hold people responsible not because they deserve it in some ultimate sense, but because holding them responsible produces better outcomes. We move from punishment as retribution to punishment as deterrence and rehabilitation. We stop harmful people not to make them suffer, but to protect others and to change their future behavior if possible. We move from condemnation to compassion. We recognize that every person who causes harm is the product of causes they did not choose, genes they did not select, environments they did not create, experiences they did not design. This does not excuse harm. It contextualizes it, and contextualizing harm changes how we respond to it. We still stop it. We still prevent it. We still protect the vulnerable, but we do it with an understanding that the person causing harm is in a sense as trapped by causation as their victims are. That understanding should make us less cruel in how we respond to harmful behavior, less focused on making people suffer for their sins, more focused on reducing total suffering, and that reducing total suffering rather than inflicting deserved punishment is a more humane ethics than the theology of sin ever provided. The concept of sin presumes a freedom we do not have, and the ethics built on sin presumes a desert we cannot earn. What survives when sin collapses is something more modest, but more honest, an ethics based on consequences, on harm reduction, on compassion for everyone, including those who cause harm. That is not the ethics of cosmic justice. It is the ethics of finite beings in a causal universe doing the best we can with the understanding we have. And it is, I think, enough. Closing one. Disturbing truths. Let me say what the four arguments add up to. Bell's theorem closed the gap. There is no third option between determined and random. Your choices are one or the other, or some combination. Neither satisfies the requirements of sin. The Schrödinger equation is deterministic. Adding quantum randomness makes things worse, not better. Randomness is not agency. You don't choose what you want to want. The ultimate sources of your desires are prior causes. You inherit the machinery of choice. You don't create it, and could have done otherwise has no coherent physical meaning that preserves the freedom sin requires. The conclusion: no human has ever truly sinned in the theological sense, because sin requires a freedom the universe does not provide. The concept of sin doesn't survive the physics, but harm survives, suffering survives, responsibility as a social construct survives, compassion survives, ethics survives. What doesn't survive is the idea that when you hurt someone you could have chosen otherwise in any sense the physics permits. That's disturbing, I know. The first time I followed this logic to its conclusion, I sat with it for a long time. Because it means everyone who has ever caused harm, every cruelty, every atrocity, every act of violence was the inevitable result of prior causes, or had a random component, either way not ultimately free, and that feels wrong. It feels like it lets people off the hook, like it makes harm less serious, but it doesn't make harm less serious. It makes harm exactly as serious. What it changes is who deserves blame, and the answer the physics gives is no one deserves blame in the cosmic sense. Everyone deserves compassion, including those who cause harm. We still stop them. We still prevent harm. We still prevent Dan. We tell you without hatred, without the belief that suffering is an appropriate response to sin. Because sin in the sense theology requires has never happened. Disturbing truths are still truths, and the physics and my experience is usually right.